I'd like to call the Rules and City Government Committee meeting to order. Roll call. I note Alderman Arnett and Alderman Chandlermeyer here, and we're joined by Alderman Savage. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. You will need a second for that.
I will second the approval of the agenda as written.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next item, business miscellaneous, approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 2nd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, appointments and reappointments. The reappointment of Mr. Chambers to the Ethics Commission. I don't see Hillary in the room. These are reappointments. There are no. So are we going to just approve them without anyone speaking for them? Any questions for Mr. Chambers? Do we have Mr. Chambers' first name yet? Because his thing isn't coming up on my. Oh, there it is. Philip Chambers, Philip Taylor Chambers, Carrollton Avenue. Are there any questions about the appointment of Mr. Chambers, reappointment?
No, Madam Chair.
None here.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the reappointment of Mr. Chambers to the Ethics Commission, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the next is Mr. Jim Dozel to the Ethics Commission. Again, it's reappointment. I think we're all very familiar with Dozel.
Mm-hmm. Move. We recommend favorably.
I will second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next reappointment is Mr. Jim Martin to Art and Public Places.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all further discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next is the reappointment of Ms. Lynn Farrow to Arts and Public Places.
So moved.
Trying to see.
AP
Ooh.
4125.
Who did the submittal letter?
Who did the what?
Submittal letter. Oh, it's from the mayor. Right. I second.
I assume all of these are from the mayor's office. I could be
I
wrong.
just, as
Okay.
we have been getting email that is somewhat controversial here, but the mayor's putting the name forward.
Well, I think I would just like to note that the controversy generally comes from people who are no longer on the committee. They chose to remove themselves for whatever reason, so to still have a voice is questionable to me. But the motion is to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Is that a aye? Okay. Okay, we're good. So we're just going down the list. We're on reappointment of Cynthia Tolles Cruson to Arts and Public Places.
So move.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the next is the reappointment of Mr. David Arthur to Arts and Public Places.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the reappointment next is reappointment Ms. Jennifer Beard to the Civil Service Board.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then I believe it's the last one, the reappointment of Ms. Diane Butler to the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor,
Aye.
please say aye. Okay, moving right along. Let's go on to legislation. 03024, fence permit requirements related to use and development standards in the city's zoning code, Title 21. The sponsor of the legislation, Alderman Savage, is with us, and I understand you have some changes. You have 4 amendments to your legislation. You know how I feel about amending your own legislation, so I'm glad you're.
Yes. And so it started off with 3 amendments, but after the last Rules and Government meeting, you basically requested that I circle up with the Planning and Zoning Director. So I did that. We sat down, we reworked it, and so now we have a substitute amendment, which is number 4, which again basically substitutes the entire legislation. But we hope that it simplifies things. So in your consideration, again, I'm not going to introduce 1 through 3. I'm going to get them removed from the agenda for the council meeting and just focus on Amendment 4 for this afternoon.
Well, let me ask the process question. Do those first 3 amendments appear before any other body? Did they not go before environmental matters? My question then goes to, can we remove them? And maybe this is a Mr. Lyles question. There are 3 amendments that the sponsor would like to withdraw. Those amendments did not go to the Environmental Matters Committee. Can he simply withdraw them here? Okay. So does there have to be an official action? Do we have to vote on his request to withdraw them? Or can he simply obliterate them from our agenda? Mr. Lyles, would you get on a microphone, please?
Ma'am, Mike Lyles, City Attorney. In answer to your question about whether the sponsor of the amendments can withdraw, yes, he can withdraw them at any time. And we'll just put a notation before the council in the mayor's script so that it's not considered. And so the only thing that will go up is the original resolution or ordinance.
Okay.
Without the
Great.
amendments. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So would you verbally restate your action, and then it'll be in the minutes?
Yeah, so I would ask that the committee take no action on amendments 1 through 3 because I'm not going to be introducing them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would ask that you focus on Amendment 4.
Okay. Would you like to now speak to Amendment 4?
Yes, Madam Chair. So if you open up Amendment 4, the changes are in blue, but let's see, if you go through the first few pages, the blues are mostly just adding new titles, headers for clarity, but the substantive changes will be on page 4 underneath just one section underneath the light and air obstruction, which is number 5.
We don't have page numbers.
But keep going. It's the one that the other way.
3.
There it is. And it's the area that's in blue that is the new information or the reworked information.
That's correct. And so if you look at that section, and again, these are all under the light and air obstructions because that was my main intention with this legislation is to provide some clarity on that provision. Again, that provision is currently in our code. And so it creates 3 subsections. The first one deals with fencing along forests or open spaces. And it's similar to the amendment, but it states that if there are fences proposed to be installed along forests and open spaces with no homes within 50 feet, that the fences must have gaps at or equal to at least 50% of the fence's surface area. And then the second one, B.
Alderman, did you have a question about A?
No, actually, it's on
Okay.
B. Well,
Okay.
it is going to come back to A, yes.
Well, let's let him finish his explanation.
Okay, and then B focuses on privacy fences, in that basically states that they won't be allowed within 10 feet of a facing window of an adjacent property. And the intention with that is that if you have, we don't want to block the light coming into an adjacent window, and that was the language that was suggested by the planning director. And C is dealing with fences on steep slopes, that says that the director may adjust the height of the fence if there is a slope that is 15% or greater on the rear or side yard. And so it's not a hard requirement, but it does give the director the ability to adjust the fence height if he or she receives testimony from the public that, or some other kind of concern that they hear, just give them some more flexibility. So those are the main changes. If you go to the very last page, there are 2 definitions, but those I don't think are really too, there's not too much to discuss with those. It takes the forest definition from chapter 21, existing definition. And then privacy fence is one that the director helped craft, which refers to a fence constructed primarily of non-translucent materials with minimal openings designed to completely obstruct external views. And so it doesn't prohibit privacy fences all over the city. It just states that they should be limited when there's a facing window.
Alderman, I'll let you ask your question, Alderman Annette.
Yeah, so it starts with this definition of privacy fence, which says primarily of non-translucent materials with minimal openings. The plastic fences, like for the one at the former home of Chief Stokes, has no openings. So does minimal here mean you have to have some opening?
May I ask for clarification? Is there no entrance area where that fence is?
There's a gate, but it is also plastic and has no opening.
Okay, but the gate does not qualify, or the opening for
Well,
the
the
gate.
openings that the legislation is talking about is spacing between boards or lattice or whatever, which at one point was 2-inch space between. So if you had a wooden fence, you had to have 2 inches separating each of the things. So this definition, it seems to me, unless we're going to say no opening is minimal opening.
I don't understand what you're getting at.
So are you familiar with the plastic fence, former Fire Chief Dave Stokes on Bay Ridge right before it turns into Tyler, the old farmhouse?
I'm not, but I'm familiar
Okay,
with
so he has
plastic
a-
fencing like
He has a
that.
plastic fence. Somebody has managed to run into it twice, but the prefab plastic fences have no opening. There is a gate, but the gate is closed and it has no opening. So this, unless we're clear about what we mean by minimal openings, if 0 openings is considered the low edge of minimal, you could not have a plastic fence.
No, that's not correct. This is under very specific circumstance when you're talking about being next to 10 feet within a facing window, from a facing window. That is a
Well,
very specific
uh,
situation that would.
I'm glad you're going there because, first of all, it seems the planning director isn't familiar with side yard setbacks, but in most of the R2 zones, side yard setback is 6 feet. But in any case, that would mean no privacy fences in Ward 8 because most of the residents have a 6-foot side yard setback. And my fence between both of my neighbors are close to windows, mostly my window. So this would dramatically change the existing conditions, I think, in all the R2, possibly R3 and R4, but certainly R2 and R1 and R1A and R1B. So I would have a real issue with that. And when you go up to sub A there, where it says that is only dealing with forest, and that says that 50% of the fence has to be open, and that's quite a bit of open. It would
Well,
would certainly allow wildlife to pass
We
through
can
the fence.
focus on one issue at a time.
The private.
Yeah.
The privacy fence issue we can get into.
Yeah, I got that.
I can't agree.
We'll just wait for the chair.
I couldn't find it.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
okay. I just want to focus our dialogue here. If it's on the privacy fence, if you're concerned with the wording, then either we could talk about how it could be changed, but I also don't feel very strongly about that. That was kind of coming from some dialogue with the Building Board of Appeals, and that was kind of the standard they were using. Is that? But again, that being said, I would be fine if the committee wants to recommend rewording or even striking that subsection B.
Yeah, I guess the general issue is privacy fences. What is the problem with the privacy fence? There are a lot of stockade fences in Ward 8, which have no openings. They're the half board, half rounded, and so forth, and they are used for privacy. I have 6-foot tall fences across my rear side yards, and I don't have it across my backyard. But I'm wondering why we're getting into privacy fences at all. I do subscribe to the intent in terms of fences that are separating large communities and fences that are on a slope. In fact, I'm surprised. I think a gradient of 15% on a slope is pretty steep. I wonder if that isn't actually not restrictive enough in terms of that. 15% slope on within 10 feet, or for each 10 feet. And I thought that was the genesis of this legislation.
Correct.
So for me, I wouldn't have a problem making A less restrictive and therefore more comprehensive. I do have a problem with B. I don't think you need it at all. And I would recommend taking it out unless I didn't see the planning commission report them spending any time talking about private fences. Where's the
That's fine with me.
Yeah, so for the committee, I would make a motion that we remove both the reference to privacy fences in 216070B5 and also in the definition in 2172, whatever it is. That would be a motion from me for the committee to consider.
So Alderman Arnett, just for my clarification, you're talking about removing the privacy fence portion on page 4, section 5, which subsection B.
Correct.
I will second your motion.
And then remove it also. I think that if privacy fences is going to stay in 2172, by saying with minimal openings, it implies there must be some opening. And there are fences, I don't like them, plastic fences. You remember the great white plastic fence?
And it wasn't
across from-
plastic. Every time you say plastic fence, and I know how demeaning and deteriorating that is.
Yeah.
But different types of materials.
Right. Right.
And
Vinyl.
there's different types of materials. I'm
Right.
going to oppose this. I think this is, B clearly is to protect the other property owner. Can't be within 10 feet, can't block out light, which this is under light and air obstruction. And whether it has minimal opening or larger openings or whatever, it's the property owner's privilege to do that. And to take that away, I think, is stripping the owners of their right.
You and I are in agreement. That's why I wanted to take it out.
But I think it's a protection. I really believe it's a protection for both of the property owners. So I'm going to oppose that amendment, taking out privacy fence.
Okay.
How do you address this if this is taken out? So doesn't have to be within 10 feet. Doesn't have to be, near a window or.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the adjacent property owner.
Yeah. Well, first of all, because it says within 10 feet, it is going to be any side yard fence or backyard fence
Mm-hmm.
in most of the residential zone. And because most of them in R2 particularly have a 6-foot setback, which means if you're where the fence would be, this 2 side yard setbacks meet 6 feet from each of the houses. So on this one, you could not have a privacy fence in R2 or in your neighborhood. And I'm saying that I don't understand the need for this, first of all, but secondly, it is virtually eliminating the ability for a privacy fence, whatever that means, between neighbors in community.
Well, I don't see it as eliminating.
It
Is
says
that your
there shall
intent?
not be within 10 feet.
Not be within 10 feet.
That would mean
would
if you had a house with no side windows, you could do it. But if you have side windows, you can't.
It would require a different type of fence because the original conversation with the directors and with the Building Board of Appeals was that those types of fences right next to or within 10 feet of a window could unduly impact the neighbor. And so the idea would be that they're still allowed to put up the fence, but it would have to have more openings to allow some light and air.
So maybe we can ask the city attorney whether I'm properly construing this. But here it says light and air obstruction under 5, and B says privacy fences, which are fences with minimal openings, cannot be within 10 feet of a facing window on an adjacent property, which means in R2, where the side yard setbacks are 6 feet, all of the side yard fences will fall under this provision, and any of them most of the houses have side windows, so none of those homes could have side yard fences.
Well, sir, Mike Lyle, city attorney, your interpretation based on your knowledge and experience with the definition is all that's required. This is not a legal issue. It's a spatial issue based on your experience, and you can definitely make that judgment as it relates to the type of fence, the size, the height, the fence, and the side setbacks. Might require someone from planning and zoning to kind of give you some assistance with that, but all of this is not a legal question at this point. It's just your physical understanding and your experience understanding of the fence and the setback.
I don't think I understood your answer.
Well, you're asking for a legal
Right.
pronouncement on something that you can clearly observe for yourself. It's not legal at all.
Okay, well, that is the answer I was seeking, yes. I don't think you can do legislation that by fiat eliminates the ability, the previously existing ability to have side yard fences that are privacy fences or any kind of fence that cannot be along a house that has a side window.
The council can do as it wishes in this regard. So if you made a motion to amend or to
Right.
strike that portion,
Okay,
and that right now is before the committee.
good. So, we ready for the vote? My motion was to strike that subsection B under 5 and also the definition under 2172.
And I had seconded the motion.
So let me ask the sponsor again. So does deleting the privacy fence discussion completely, that's what we're doing, support the planning commission's issue?
Well, the planning commission, I don't believe, commented on the privacy fence issue. I think the director and I ended up adding that in our last conversation, but I don't think it's necessarily, as far as my original intention, it's not, I don't see it as essential. I do think it fits in the whole idea of defining what obstructions to light and air are, but I'm fine with it removing or staying in place.
Okay, so that's not going to impinge on anybody else's right.
Right.
Okay. Further discussion?
Not on this, no.
Well, there's a motion on the floor
Yeah.
to eliminate B under 5 as well as the definition of privacy fence. I believe that's the motion. On the floor.
Yes.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next.
There was in earlier amendments, I cannot find it in Amendment 4, something about requiring the approval of the adjacent neighbors. Does that carry over into Amendment 4?
No, that does not
Good.
carry over.
Good, because I don't think we can require getting neighbors' approval for fences on your private property. And I have no further.
The only, it's not a carryover. The only thing we put in there is the allowance of the director to make some changes.
Make them
Make some
change the
changes.
fence. I
as
wouldn't
far as-
have a problem even having something that says they have to notify their next door neighbors, but not have the approval of the next door neighbor before you can put in the fence. I would have fences on both sides. I would be surprised if one morning I woke up and there was a crew there putting up a 6-foot tall privacy fence beside my house. I have great neighbors, and we have put up fences and replaced fences, and we consult with each other. But we have an instance right on my street where someone, it's actually on Chesapeake, wants to put up a 10-foot tall white fence next to a commercial property, the corner of 6th and Chesapeake. And I'm sure that the owner of the property that is being spited would not approve of a 10-foot tall fence, or maybe they don't care. But I certainly don't. And in the R2NC, you can't have a 10-foot tall fence. But I certainly do think that if you're going to be putting up a fence, you ought to, as a courtesy and maybe as per code, let your neighbor know what you're planting, your budding neighbor. But that you say
Okay.
that's not in there. So
All right. Any other Alderman Schennemeyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alderman Savage, I appreciate your work on this amendment, really narrowing down to, I think, more specifically the situation that your neighborhood had gone through to try to address this. I have a couple questions, though, and something that had gone on in one of my neighborhoods. There's a path going through a forest that some of my neighbors had expressed interest in, or some of my constituents had expressed interest in putting a privacy fence along their property line that might abut the forest. Would this legislation potentially prohibit that, since the property line is right along that forest path?
Let's see. So in this case, it would be fences installed along areas adjacent to forest or open space. No homes on the applicant's side. So in this case, the applicant would be the homeowners, and
Yeah.
presumably their home would be, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how far away. I suppose if it's further than 50 feet from their house, then they would have to have a fence installed that would have some of the 50% open space, the 50% gaps. So it may impact that situation.
So, makes sense, the legalese here. So with no homes within 50 feet on the applicant's side. So, yeah, there aren't. It's just woods.
Now,
So
it
it
would also
would-
have to be a forest that is at least, let's see.
It would meet the definition
It
that you
would meet
got
that.
there.
Okay.
The planning commission took this up specifically. I underlined it in orange. That means in a 4x8 sheet, half of it would have to be open.
Yeah.
And part of that was to allow wildlife to get through, was it not, Alderman Savage?
No, we didn't. We talked about addressing the wildlife issue, but we didn't quite get to that point.
Mm.
This is just focusing on the light in the air and trying to define that. I think because the director expressed some desire to revisit that as a broader reform in the future.
But it certainly would not allow plastic with no open.
All right. I think we have competing specific situations that might not be able to bridge the gap here, and I'm really sorry about that, but I do appreciate how you've narrowed this down to really try to cut that. And I think in most other situations, you have ironed out a lot of the gaps. So I might have a very specific situation. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, but I think for most part, you've come up with a really decent compromise, especially after what we just put down with the privacy stuff.
Yeah, I'll see if I can craft some
I think
language in your
this-
situation. It's tough to,
Yeah.
because I think there may be a way to get there. I'll have to give it some thought.
Yeah, I think in this case that needle might be hard to thread with the timeline we got left, but that's all I have, Madam Chair.
But it's
So you don't have an amendment to address?
I can't think of anything right now.
What if you made
Uh,
it by special exception?
Oh,
And then if the neighbors all want a fence that is not complying to this, has narrower openings or no openings, they go before the Board of Appeals and make their case, and the Board of Appeals will decide.
oh, yeah, that could work.
Fine with me.
Okay. Ms. Reuter, could you please help us draft an amendment on that to allow fences, privacy fences along the forest line by special exception?
Well, I think it would be under 5A.
Yeah.
We could possibly just add a sentence at the end of that says,
These,
Sorry.
these
So
yeah,
does,
Yeah.
other, yeah. So I'm trying to think how you would you word it to say like, special exceptions may be applied for to, or actually at the end you just put a comma and say, or as approved by
special exception.
special exception. No.
So if it doesn't meet these minimum requirements, it could be heard as a special exception.
Yeah. We don't have to vote on that today. We can just get that drafted for when it goes to the council
Yes.
at large.
Yes, that we can draft it. The simplest way is other fences by special exception. So you've got a definition, and it's very clear that if it doesn't meet that definition, you have to file for a special exception. We can draft the language and send it around to the sponsor and the council.
And we don't have to hold this up to wait for that. We can just vote on that for the council at large.
Well, is the sponsor good with letting the full councils without it coming before, without the
Yeah, that's
rules
fine.
committee?
I'm
make
fine
it.
with the intention behind that. So yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I'd prefer
would-
that because I think it's probably getting close to the 90-day limit anyway for legislation.
Yeah, I don't want one amendment to slow things down here.
Well, I don't think it necessarily has to slow things. You could make your motion, your amendment, and if we believe in concept that it'll work.
Yeah, the language can come to the council,
Okay.
but your intent can be stated in your motion or your approval recommendation.
Okay. In that case, may I make
Please.
a proposal for Amendment 5 to allow privacy fences along the forest line by special exception? I am seeing the sponsor raise his hand, who probably
Okay.
has more
Well, just-
understanding of this issue than I do.
Well, just another suggestion instead of special exception, we could just say at the end, again, just a comma, it says, or as, I was going to say like, or as allowed by the director, or as determined by the director.
I
But
accept.
then
I accept.
instead of the full special exception, just allow the director to have discretion to.
But the director can only have discretion up to 10% of the code. So you have that 50-50 requirement. The director is only going to be able to close the gap or change the material for a limited amount.
I'm not sure I interpret that way. The director would only be able to approve up to 10% of the change. What you're saying?
In the code, the administrative authority of the director can automatically grant relief up to 10%. Like if it's ridge height, they can automatically grant up to 10% higher or lower, whatever. But I think that pretty much throughout Title 21, and I think this is in the land use code too, the state land use code, the prerogatives, the administrative prerogatives of the planning and zoning director or the planning commission are limited to only up to 10% of whatever the underlying code is. We have people from the Office of Law that can verify or not that reading of the code, but I've come into contact with this a few times. And that is, it happened in the Eastport shopping.
So that changes the authority back to special.
Yeah.
Let's
Again,
just,
I'm fine with special exception too, because I think the intent of that would still allow the neighbors, whom ultimately I think we're all trying to make sure at least have some protection. It would at least give them the chance chime in.
So there's the motion on the floor speaks to sending it to special exception.
Just a clause at the end of 5A.
Right.
I think
At the
that's
end of the clause to appear, is that a complete sentence or at the end of 5A?
You're the English
I know.
teacher.
I don't know what I was
Why are
hoping
you
she
asking
would read
for?
it back, but I haven't heard anything. Could you read it back to us, Ms. Bruder?
wish we could have more microphones in this room.
We have plenty of microphones. They're just in the wrong places.
Hi, Cynthia Reuter, Office of Law, Policy, Legislative Analyst. At the end of 5A, it'd be a comma or other offenses by special exception. Period.
So
Okay.
where?
So does that
Where
meet
did
your
you?
need?
Where did you say that would go?
At the end of 5A.
Oh, okay. Oh, after area, you're saying.
So behind surface, comma, and then okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have the
Okay.
general concept, and we can craft it out and get it out to this, because this won't be at our next meeting. It'll have a
Okay.
little bit of time. So that's the motion.
All right. It's been
Second.
properly seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. Alderman Savage, the last chance. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And this will be listed as the Rules Committee amendment.
So I have a request. Do we have the official city protractor? I'm looking at C. If this is 90 degrees, this is 45 degrees. I'm wondering how did you come up with the 15%?
Alderman Savage.
So that is the standard used in other parts of our environmental code in
Perfect answer.
particular. It's used in the Forest Conservation Act as well as the grading and sediment control. 15% is generally what they consider steep slope.
Works for me.
And I'd like to add that the Director of Planning and Zoning has approved or given his thumbs up to all of the amendments that the Alderman brought forward. He called earlier, couldn't be with us today, but so. Okay, further discussion, Mr. Lyle?
Yeah, I have a question about the 15%. I think there was, you asked a question about the 15% and how you got to 15%, because usually when you're talking about grade, it's degrees. I'm trying to figure out where the 15% of what?
Slope.
The slope.
Oh, you're right. That needs to be inserted. No, yeah, because this fence is located on rising slopes greater than 15%.
15% of what?
The slope.
It's after slope, so it's of the grade, the topography.
Grade is degrees, I believe, and not percentage. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's how we've done it in the other environmental code, like specifically the grading code. That's how they word it, is 15% slopes. And critical area, I believe, has
Which it is degree. 15-degree slope.
Because 15 degrees has a specific definition in space. 15%, you always have to start with what are you, the percent of what? 15% of the overall coverage area, or 15% from grade, or 15% from where the house is, or 15%. We may have to do something to make it clear what the 15% is based on. Degrees is usually based on in space, the XY axis,
Yeah.
but
you're
percent
right.
has to have a basis. 15% from what?
So it should be any grade greater than 15%, 15 degrees. Degrees
I'm
are
not a
percents in
technical
this
person in
case.
that regard. I just think that it's unclear to me as
So
someone that's
I think I know what you're saying. So if you look at chapter 17, we have a definition for steep slope, which means a slope of greater than 15% grade.
Right.
And that's coming from
15%. Yeah, that's a hard one, because usually I was only in geometry class for a few days, but we usually talked about degrees from grade as opposed to percent from grade.
May I ask Mr. Feiner to come forward as our Director of Central Services? Can you shed any light on the industry standard?
Not my area of expertise, admittedly. Sorry, Matt Flinner,
Okay, I'm
Central
sorry, I
Services
thought-
Director. But I agree with Mr. Lyles. I think you would use degrees if you're getting out your official government protractor, as I heard before.
Well, again, just to clarify, I mean, I think that's the language that came from the state as far as the sediment control code, as well as forest conservation. So I'm confident in replicating that language. I don't want to overthink it too much, but we can certainly verify and have a correcting amendment if we need to. But
When you read that,
yeah.
So it sounds like this is something we can address on the floor. If there needs to be a change, and I really would like for Mr. Jakubiec to weigh in, because he did approve the language that we have. He didn't question that for whatever reason, but I think we can do this for the full body if Alderman Savage.
Yeah, that's
agree.
fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so further discussion. All in favor of giving O30 as amended? We have two amendments. A favorable recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And again, we'll take up the 15% discussion on the floor, and we will have in front of us the actual new amendment, the Schandelmeyer amendment. We already have the Arnett. Okay, going on to 0825, Chesapeake Children's Museum lease renewal through June 30th, 2030. I'm listed as one of the sponsors. Just got added yesterday or the day before. So I'll speak to it if need be. This is a city-owned property that has fallen into disrepair over the years. We've done, I think, a pretty good job of bringing it up to standard, and the leasees, I guess we'll call them, have been doing a good job of trying to maintain this structure, but a lease agreement is needed. They're leasing our property, and so this is the official lease agreement with the children. And I see Mr. Feiner at the podium, so he obviously wants to speak.
Oh, sorry, I was anticipating questions, so I was just
okay.
preparing myself.
So question, Alderman Schandelmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be a very specific question that could be a public works issue or not, but so I have a couple constituents live in the Admiral Ferry departments, work downtown, and they walk that path by the Chesapeake Children's Museum at night coming home from work, and it has been described as spooky because of lack of lighting. Is there any way that this lease can encourage an extra light get installed along that path? Or is that a public works issue, or is that not related to the lease whatsoever?
No, I'm actually happy to explore that. There is one term in this lease where the city is going to replace security lighting. Having not been out to the site, I don't know exactly where that light is located and how it would make that path feel more secure. But while we're adding security lighting to the property, we're happy to assess the whole thing. We can bring light meters out and assess the lumens projecting on different spaces and try to bring dark areas up to industry standards.
Yeah, there's one light at the very close to the entrance of the bridge from the fields over by Bates, and then nothing until you reach the building proper. So there's a good stretch where it's just real dark out.
Good feedback, thank you. I'm happy to discuss with Public Works too if there's a need to maybe light the whole path even beyond our property lines.
May I ask, is this large enough a project to create a capital improvement plan for it?
Potentially, I think the level of effort would determine that. It would depend if we're replacing bulbs and existing fixtures, adding all new fixtures. So it might turn into a bigger project, and then it would be on future CIP planning documents.
And if we can't wait until next year to create a new CIP, maybe a request to the Finance Committee for additional resources to address that this year.
I'm happy to request that if needed. And the council also provides us with a facility budget that we can allocate to projects of our choosing. So I'm happy to dedicate our own facility CIP funding to improve safety and security at that property.
And is there a consideration for motion activated dusk to dawn lighting?
Most security lighting is dusk to dawn and not motion activated, so it's always on regardless of whether the sensors are picking up a person or an animal. So anything that we wanted to keep that walkway secure all night long, I would recommend dusk to dawn and LED fixtures to minimize electric use.
I only know about these lightings because I had them put around my father's house. Dusk to dawn motion sensor, and he's got a lot of wildlife that's going through. But I was pretty surprised that you could get both features in lights now, both dusk to dawn and motion. So
Lighting controls are very advanced now, and we're even using them inside of facilities and only turning lights on in rooms when they're occupied. So there's a lot of opportunities there to cut down on electric use.
okay, thank you, Alderman Arnett.
So I remember the last time this lease came up, there was a lot of discussion about the condition of the building itself. And in fact, it was borderline habitable at that point. I noticed the lease, basically the payment in lieu is that that Dr. Woods and the staff keep the building up. Have you inspected the building? Is it structurally sound at this point? Because it wasn't back then. We let the lease go anyway, but there were some problems.
I have not seen any documents or structural analyses on that building at this time. However, facilities management and our engineering team are launching a facility condition assessment led by a vendor who's going to look at all of our city-owned property and give us recommendations that then we'll use to build our deferred maintenance plan. So I plan to send them out to the Children's Museum, look at both the radio tower that's out there and the structure, and collect their recommendations for what we need to do to preserve and protect that building.
Alderman, I do recall that we had a roof put on and we did some structural work on the rear of the building. That's been a number of years.
Yeah, and the building was actually sort of leaning in two different directions
Right.
across the middle section. And I think all buildings should be structurally sound, but ones with children in them, I think there's an extra life safety liability on the part of the city. So this is certainly an exhaustive lease, but I do think that it would be appropriate to have a look at the soundness of the building. There were also some questions about cleanliness of the building, but soundness is certainly in our. And again, if it's unsound and the basis of the contract is they do the work, that could be a considerable amount of money, and I doubt they have it. So, I just think it would be good to check out the building.
We're happy to do that, and I can get more information to you once we check it out and conduct our analysis.
Otherwise, I'm prepared to make a motion that we recommend favorably. In fact, I just did.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of
Aye.
0825, please say aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much.
Did you know that these meetings could be so exciting?
I've thoroughly enjoyed all of my moments standing before you all. I've never seen this side of government at the city level, so it's very fascinating to a government operations nerd. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here.
It's a good thing we had the city attorney here too.
Yes, both of you, everyone. Ms. Buckland, you got off easy today, so it's all good. But it's about time. Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order? Alderman Schnellmeyer.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just so for folks' reference, tomorrow, the city's No Harm VIP program, along with Moms Demand Action and our Parks and Recreation Department, is having a gun violence prevention and wellness fair at Pip Moyer Rec Center from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's going to be a lot of fun with free activities. So I encourage everyone to come by and wear orange.
Thank you, Alderman. I'll be there, but I won't be in. I have another event all morning. But I'm extremely glad that
You're
in orange
you're in-
today.
you're
Just
here-
rewear the
well,
suit.
okay, so this counts for tomorrow. Okay, just for the record, I have orange on.
To the dry cleaner.
But yes, tomorrow I'll be in white. But I'm very pleased that Mr. Carey is taking on leadership of the city. Mr. Romeo.
Of course.
Of course.
Is
I
there
know.
anyone who wasn't?
Yeah, few, not many. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.